Scott, I want to start with you because we're starting this at the youth level. The future of football, which is on everyone's mind. It's been discussed so much. From your standpoint, running USA football and this new heads-up program, give us an idea of your sense of where you see the immediate, and crystal ball stuff is, I think, senseless, but the next 5 years of football.
Well, so I actually believe that it's on the upswing. I mean, it clearly was on the downswing, and participation is a good example. And we've actually seen, we track it, and our friends at the Sport and Fitness Industry Association track it as well. It's starting to stabilize, and in fact, I probably shouldn't say this, but we already have some early data that's starting to show that we might be ticking back up. So the good news is, and actually a lot of youth sports are starting to tick back up, so that's very positive. But when people talk about the game, and I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure these gentlemen would agree, that it is safer today than it's ever been. Now, none of us in this room want to put our head in the sand and suggest there aren't serious issues, and the good news is we're addressing those. I think Heads Up Football is a very good program, obviously, but my frustration often is most people just go right to the tackling part, and it's a comprehensive program. It has 3 health and safety components: concussion, heat and hydration, and sudden cardiac, as well as tackling, blocking, and equipment fitting. So you have to look at the program as a whole, but in short, maybe the best way to give an example of, I think, the progress we're making with that program is, I often refer to youth football as the Wild West, but we now have 70% of youth football practicing a consistent approach to the game. So that is, I think, a massive step forward in the game, and again, that's coaches being trained, that's a player safety coach in the organization, so we're making progress.
All right, so now, and that coach education is a great part, so now we take it, David, to the college level. You're going out and watching high school football players, and I'm assuming juniors and seniors primarily, focusing on the players. What are you seeing today, and where you see your next 5 years going in the young men that you're recruiting to play?
I'm really excited about football in general right now. And we went through a really tough period over the last few years, and for me, and I agree 100%, there's a bit of optimism for me because the training is happening at a younger age for these people. The coaching at youth football is better regardless of what reality TV shows are out there showing you the insanity. But the youth coaches are better, which means there's better football, which means it's safer football. So for me, what's fascinating is really looking at now this generation coming through, because the last generation, which is where we've got a lot of the data and all the things that have happened, I'm curious about this generation now that they've gone, when they make their progression, and now they're 30, they're 40, they're 50, and looking back and see how many people now are living better lives because they were safer going through this entire process. So the coaching is better. I think on the college level, conference by conference, you see the conferences changing their practices and being smarter and being better and being more conscious, and not just the practice of the game. Yes, we're practicing football, but then practice of when there is a traumatic event, whether it is associated with heat, or it is a concussion event, or it is something else. Everyone has been more tied down to, hey, let's have a common practice. Hey, let's talk about what are you doing, what are you doing? Let's find the best thing for us to do with our young people. So I think in general, the entire world of football has gotten healthier in the last few years, and I'm excited about when this whole generation now makes the progression all the way through. I think we're going to see not just a small jump, I think we're going to see a huge jump, and people living longer, healthier lives.
That's great. Herb, do you see that bleed through? Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Herb, do you see that bleed through when you watch the pro game right now?
I do. I will say this, and make this perfectly clear with everyone in the room. Everyone does not have a skill set to play football. Okay? So let's make that perfectly clear. This is a combative sport. It's a sport of contact. And we can all sit here and be naive and think that we don't like collisions. We do. This is why they build these arenas. Okay, we can sit here and say, well, you know what, we don't want to see that. We do want to see that. We have a society and we like when people hit each other. That's how it is. Now, here's the bottom line. How are we teaching them to do that? That's the most important thing. Look, with all the information we have right today on concussions, on how to teach young players the proper technique, how to play football, it's a much safer game. In the years that I played football, now he mentioned I was a head coach. I was an assistant coach. I was in the National Football League for 30 years. 30 years. I've seen it from 30 years to right now. The game is much safer. It's much better. But let me tell you something. If you play football, you have to have a certain amount of attitude. This game is about this. It's real simple. You test a person's will. You knock a man off the spot. That's what you do in football. Okay, now all this pretty stuff that we watch on television, quarterback throw the ball and all that stuff, that's all pretty. But the bottom line is this. Some people are not built to play football, and that's okay. That's okay. Football's going to be fine. It's America's sport, whether we like it or not. It's the biggest elephant in the room, and that's why it's taking all these hits. Because everyone says, well, football's this, football's that. Let me tell you something. Football is going to be around for a long time. It's not going anywhere. So I know we're all worried about football. Don't we worry about football. It's going to be fine. We like contact. We like competitive violence within the rules. That's what football's about. It's not going to change, ladies and gentlemen. You want to play touch football, flag football, that's great. But for you to get to the professional level, you have to have a mindset. 1% of all the college athletes become pro football players. 1. So if you have a child, or you're a coach, and you're thinking little Billy and Johnny's going to play, you're not. You're not going to play. It's not, look, this is a sport that 1%, 6% of all the high school athletes that play high school football become Division I college players. I coached the Under Armour game for the last 5 years. 90 of the best All-American athletes in the country. He's got one of the kids I coach, going to Stanford, all right? When I look at those kids, there's 90 of them. 6 of them out of the 90, about every year right now, are professional football players. 6 out of the 90. And these are the best players in the country. So we can sit here and be naive and say, oh, we're trying to make football safer. Let me tell you something. With all I know about the concussions and all this and all that, if you ask me, with all the information I have right now on football, when I go play, I'm the first in line. Okay? Football was a way for me to get out of my situation. It provided me an opportunity. Football, for a lot of athletes, has the ability where they can make a living and get out of their situation. It gave me an opportunity to go to college. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college. I knew when I was in high school I needed a scholarship. So we could sit here and say, well, what does it bring? I tell you what it brings. This is what football is all about. I'm getting along, I know, but I'm on television.
You'd be fired by now, I think.
Football like life. No commercials. Football like life is this. And all these men know it when they're involved in football or any sport. There's a huddle, like in life. And the greatest thing of football is this, for me as a player, as a coach. When I walked in that huddle, it was diverse. It was people from Alabama. It was people from Florida. It was people with long hair. It was people with no hair. It was Republicans. It was Democrats. It was people from the city. It was people from the suburbs. It was people from the ghetto. But when we walked in the huddle, there was trust. There was trust. And we knew that we needed each other to have success. See, that's what football brings. Forget about what you see on television. It's what the guys in the huddle understand. We got to do this together. See, this is what life is about. And we don't do this with our kids enough. We don't huddle up. We don't huddle at home. We're too busy doing this. We don't get in the huddle. See, football, you got to get in the huddle. And you got to look a man to the left, look a man to the right, and his eye, and you got to say, hey, man, I trust you. You're my brother. That's what football provides. A life skill that you can never, ever get without a huddle. The huddle is the most important thing in sports. In any sport. Go get in the huddle. Because when you get in the huddle, there's no hang-ups. You don't care where the person's from. You really don't care. They become a teammate. That's what sports provides us all. So let's understand that. Let's don't worry about who's going to be a pro and what your legacy's going to be. That's a bunch of stuff. What does it give you? It gives you a chance to understand what this world's about. It's about people. It's about diversity. It's about people understanding we got to trust each other so we can better ourselves. That's football. Woo!
All right, thank you, Senator Edwards. That's
You invited me in this free.
There's a little bit in there, and that's phenomenal because it addresses professional football. It addresses what we talked about, what I watched my son go through. Scott, what you lived through in youth football?
Well, just to add a little context, that I won't be as long-winded, but he talks about how this impacts youth, and I found it fascinating. And we went out and talked to a lot of different organizations. You know, not everyone looks at the concussion issue and the safety issue the same way. Frankly, when we're talking to folks in underserved communities, it's amazing to me that the stat I've heard, which is just staggering and appalling and sad, is that potentially up to 60% of youth that play high school football, young men that play high school football, come from a single parent, no parents at home. When you talk to those parents, they're not worried about concussions. They're worried about their young men getting home, getting to school and back. They're worried about them becoming tough. And the people that they turn to make them tough are the coaches. These guys are surrogate fathers, and and that's one of the reasons we're so proud to be working with PCA, is we need to do a better job of preparing them to help these young men. They are taxed with all kinds of challenges, economic, socioeconomic, all kinds of issues. How do we give them the tools and resources in the most effective way to help those young men become great leaders? Because you're right, 99% of them they're just going to be in our society. And how do we help them be the best young men they can be?
All right, I want to get Al and Charles in here. So Al, the 49ers, now take what Scott said. So many days during the football season, you go out on the 49er practice field and there's youth football players out. And I can't believe how many come out and love just to be close, as we all did when we were that age, to be close to the men that are playing professionally.
Yeah, there's no question, Ted. I mean, I'm second in line, Herm, on raising my hand. So, to play the sport, I mean, I played padded football since I was 6 years old through 21 at the Division III, although now I think it's like FBC, I just call it Division III. And I'm one of the 99%. And you know, for me, just personal experience, I came from a divorced parents who had to work 2 jobs in South Philadelphia, and my coaches were my parents. You know, they were an extension of my home. And you know, I think what Herm was saying is, you know, what all of you do is fantastic in teaching the sport. It's what Jared and our youth football team do. It's getting participation up. But what you don't know that you're doing, or at least hopefully you know, and you're focusing on this too, is not just teaching the sport itself, but teaching these folks to be better men, teaching them to be better women, right? Teaching them to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And, you know, that goes a long way. I think as the 49ers organization, we're not just about the 10 football games we play on Sunday. Hopefully we play more than 10 football games. But we're not just about that. We're about the greater impact that we have in the community. And that touches all types of things, but youth football is a big piece of that. I mean, even David today walking up, one of the first things he says to me is, hey, you know, let Chip know, reach out, if he ever needs anything at Stanford. I mean, it's a community, it's a family. And I think these kids, you know, we bring them down to Levi Stadium, they're not only getting an education on about how to play the sport, to Herm's point, they're meeting new folks, right? They're learning how to play with passion. They're learning what responsibility means. They're learning test of will and what it means to get back up when you get knocked down. You know, so many of those things matter in life, and I think as an organization, as a brand in the NFL, our job is to be active in the community, and your job is to push us to continue to be active in the community. I grew up in a town where the Philadelphia Eagles were very close to my heart. I had Reggie White come speak at a Pee Wee event when I was 7 years old, and I'll never forget it. And my playbook was a lot of what the Philadelphia Eagles were installing all the way up through my high school, what was then called Pee Wee, right? And that stuck with me. And my vision for youth football with the 49ers was to have that same breadth of Coach Shaw, Coach Kelly. How are they impacting our communities, right? All the people that are here, what are our kids growing up and seeing, and what role models do they have to reach out to? And if we can provide that platform, we're happy to do it. So I don't know if that answers your question, Tippy.
No.
Thank you.
Well, and let's hear from Charles now. And Charles, your life, much of it in the National Football League, and engaged with players and working with players. To the pro players, how do they feel right now about the future of the game?
I think we all feel like it is on an uptick. I think when you look at what the NFL has given all of us, we're very privileged. And that's what the problem is for us. We don't want to leave it. We don't want to leave it, and that's why you see so many guys having the issues when it's time to let it go. You see, I was fortunate. You see, I had to leave before I was ready.
And I don't even think we're ever ready to leave the game. But I had to leave before it was my time. I was at the height of my career, and it was over. And fortunately for me, I was doing what it had taken to be a positive impact on society, on our community, that the Giants felt they needed to keep me on board. But that's not the case for all of us. We just see the flash. We don't see what goes into some kid or an Eli Manning going to a hospital and sharing some time with a kid with cancer. They don't see somebody going to a youth clinic and trying to instill positive values in an individual that has no father, has no mother, and is being raised by their grandparent. I think what we do as coaches and players, we have a platform that we need to start using. We need to start sharing the positive aspects of this game so that others who are less fortunate can see other ways. Because what we see is, what I tell our guys is, when you get into the National Football League, and this is what a lot of our teenagers see, is that you just see idols of comfort, control, and significance. And you know what we do to them? We polish them up and make them look good. And as an NFL player, you wake up every morning making sure those idols are there. And when it's over, when those idols are gone, when football is over, then you just see a dust print of an idol. And for us, we need to replace it. We have the money to replace it. And so what we do to replace it, we spend all of this money trying to replace those idols with significance, comfort, and control. And guess what? What happens? There isn't enough money to replace what we had when we played in the NFL. And so my job as a player engagement director is to help our guys see that there are alternatives. Your identity is not wrapped up in this game. And that's what I was talking to Scott earlier today. That's what we have to start doing at an earlier age. It's not about, especially with our high-performing athletes, it's not about that what you do on the football field. It's not about the touchdowns. It's not about the pass. It's what are you doing with your notoriety? What are you doing with your family? What are you doing in your community to make a difference? Because you are making a difference on the football field, but I think the true value of a man is what you can do off the football field and in society. And that goes for each and every one of us. It's like, what are you doing to make a difference in your community? Find something that you feel so very passionate about that you can make a difference. And if you can make a difference in one person's life, you've already made a difference. And that's what we have to convey to our athletes. That's why you're playing this game. That's why you're playing the game of football, is to make a difference. For me, it's to make a difference in someone else's life. Because when I see a person that I work with and they come back and say, man, I didn't like what you had to say to me, but I appreciate it now. I made the difference.
Well said, Charles. Thank you. And listening to you, you sound just like Ronnie Lott. Same thing. Who said that? He said, when you retire, that's not the end of your life. It's the beginning of your life. Ronnie said the same thing. I want to come back. David, everybody here made great comments. Herman and Al as well about coaches, the impact coaches made. You played for Bill Walsh, which of course is a magical name here. What made Bill an impactful coach to you?
We could spend the whole time here talking about that. But for me specifically, Bill was everything that he needed to be to whoever he needed to be it to. It's my best way to describe Bill. If Bill needed to be a yeller and screamer to that guy, he was going to be. If Bill needed to pull this guy aside and motivate him quietly, he would do that. If he needed to be the guy that put up all the plays and here's how we're going to attack those guys, that's what he needed to be. If he needed to be the guy that said, you know what, let's back off and let the players handle this one by themselves. He was the master of all of the things that it takes for a coach to be great. And it was crazy because as a player, I was going to do whatever Bill said. Right? He was an icon when he walked in, and after I played for Bill and I was done, I began coaching. A lot of those days would like come back to me, and I remember what Bill said and how he did it and how he handled situations. And you know, to me, he was the epitome of what it takes as a strategist, as a father figure for those guys that needed one, as a guy who put his foot in the seat of someone's pants for those that needed that also, and for some guys, they needed a confidant, and Bill would pull a guy aside and close the door and be that father figure they needed to be, and it was masterful to watch him do that.
Is that a blueprint Has that been a blueprint for you in your coaching career?
And it's hard to say, to aspire to be what Bill Walsh was.
But that's quality. I've heard that people say you don't treat everybody the same, you treat them all fairly.
There's 100%. I've heard Herm say that multiple times, and that's the way you have to be. You treat people the way they're supposed to be treated, and sometimes, as a head coach in particular, you treat them the way they need to be treated, not sometimes the way they want to be treated. So whatever that young man needs for me to do to him, to help him be a great football player, be a great student, and have success after football. And I agree, sometimes it's going to be that you get that look from that kid, and like, Coach, why are you being so hard on him? And my response to them is, my responsibility for you right now is not the same responsibility as I have for the 30-year-old version of you. That's the guy that I'm trying to make proud of this moment. You might not like me very much right now, but when you're 30 and you're looking back at this moment, I'm going to get that phone call and say, Coach, I got you.
So some of you may know this, but in David's office hangs, I think now it's 3 framed jerseys, and all with incredibly personal messages of some form of thank you, very personal forms of thank you to David from people who played for him, including a guy named Sherman. That's got, I mean, that has to be the reward, right, for a coach. I mean, that's what we're trying to get to today is this coaching. When you see the man at 30 who's had professional success, material reward, but he thanks you that way?
And in college football in particular, and youth sports, if that's not the goal, then you're wrong. If that's not the goal, then you're just wrong. And what I try to talk to other, especially young college coaches that are coming up, which is, if we do all the things that we're talking about now, and teaching responsibility, and teaching character, and teaching toughness, and putting them through something really, really difficult to achieve something special together, when we can do that, guess what? We're giving them the building blocks to be successful. But at the same time, we're giving them the building blocks to win football games too. So we're it's not separate. The things that we're teaching, yes, we want them to be better husbands and fathers and all those things, that's all great. We're also trying to win football games also. But if we approach it where we're just trying to win football games, now what are we teaching? Because at some point, the game leaves us all. At some point, we're done. And then, when Herm mentioned that legacy has nothing to do with football. It has to do with the people's lives that you've touched along your way. And if that's not a priority, I believe that you're 100% wrong.
Herm, how did these very things that David was just talking about, and maybe some of the Walsh things, how did that play for you as a professional coach?
Well, I always felt this way. Coaches like parents. Things you find out about coaching is real simple. When you decide to be a head coach, it's a job of service. You serve people. They don't serve you. And I've always felt there's a thing in coaching called KYP. Know your personnel. Know your personnel. Just know your personnel. And until you know your personnel, you really can't define yourself as a coach. Because you have to know the people you're coaching and the people you're about to serve. And when you understand that, then you understand the person. And when you understand the person, then they understand you care. Because if you don't really care, and it's all about winning, see, the winning takes care of itself. It really does. I mean, it's a play here or a play there, but at the end, will they follow you in this sense? And I've always told people this in life. It's like football. Are you interested or are you committed? Are you interested or are you committed? Most people are interested. See, we won't commit until we know the score. I'll commit if I know the score. It's like the Baptist preacher. Sits in the church and says, hey, who wants to go to heaven? Everybody's raising their hand. Who wants to die? Put some hand down, right? See, that's the same way we commit. We want to be interested. The players are interested in the beginning. You start practicing, they're all interested. Nice day. Now you lose about 3 in a row. I don't want to commit to this, coach. That's when you got to get them to commit. See, it's easy. It's easy to commit when you know the score. And most people aren't interested. Yeah, I'm interested. No. I go back to the huddle. I would walk in the huddle on purpose. And I'd look at guys in the eye and go, hey, man, you interested? You can be on the team, but you got to go stand on the sideline. I need 11 guys in the huddle that are committed. You got to make them commit. you got to serve them before they commit. Because if you don't serve them, they're not going to commit to you. And it's hard. It's a process. It doesn't just happen in a day or two. It's being consistent. You know, players want consistency. They really do. This guy's a fabulous coach. And the thing that I draw from it is that he's consistent. You know, believe it or not, in our world, we want discipline. We say this new generation doesn't want they want discipline, but they want to be consistent. They're going to test you. We always want to, you know, we're a society, we always want to push the line. We want to put, look, I was that way. I went to Cal Berkeley. There was a reason for that. My dad wanted me to go to Stanford. I wasn't coming to Stanford. So Dad, I got to go over there. First thing my dad said is, son, they burn the American flag. They smoke them funny cigarettes. You don't go there. I said, I'm going there. I want to go to that school. Okay? By the way, we never lost to Stanford. That was a long I'm just making that perfectly clear. All you Stanford people, I walked in this thing, I said, oh, I got to go to Stanford. It's okay. I'm not holding that against you. John Lynch is my son's godfather, so we're okay. But you have to make people commit. We all could be interested. Are you committed? When you get people to commit, and that's what you want as a coach, your number one job is to serve the people you coach to get them to commit. Because once they commit, now you got a team.
Charles, who got you to commit?
Well, the greatest story I have about that is Tom Coughlin. The first 2 years, this man, you talking about the picture of consistency was Tom Coughlin, to the point where he ran it like a military base. And so, but the part he was missing was the fact that he didn't show the players that he cared. He was consistent. He made sure you showed up on time, and he made you pay the price if you did. But the players didn't understand why, and he wouldn't tell them why. And that's the change, that's the difference in this generation than when I played. You tell me to do something, okay, I'm going to do it, and I won't ask why. But now, we are in a generation today where they want to know why they're running into a wall. And if you give them a good reason, they'll run into a wall. And that's the difference. And when we had a conversation, we were at a Christmas party that the Giants had, and I saw him interact with his grandkids, right? And it was totally different than how he acted when he was in the facility. Because he would always say, when you walk through the doors, I want you to think nothing about the outside world. It's football for as long as you're in this building. That's how he was when he first got there. And so I had never seen him in this environment before either. And so when he was playing, he was like, you're like, this Tom Coughlin? this general of a man? And he was so fun-loving. I was like, Coach, and this was the second year. This is when Michael was rebelling. Michael Strahan was rebelling. Everybody was rebelling. We had a conversation, and I said, Coach, you know, I love you, and I love what you do, and I love what you bring to this team. And you are the right man for this team. All you need to do is show the players that you care. The reason why you're doing these things, or you have the things in place, is you want to make them better men. That's what they want to see. And the next year we did it. We had a couple of events. We showed that fun-loving side. We had a bowling tournament where he looked crazy bowling, and the players got a kick out of it. He started laughing. He started just talking to players at practice while we were stretching, and all of a sudden, you see the players change the way they looked at him and how he was so respected. And it just so happened we won the Super Bowl that year. And then we go on to have mediocre seasons, and you know what? When you have a mediocre season, and Coach, you know, players like to jump off a ship and blame and start pointing fingers. And for every mediocre season we had, from literally the time he was there, they were all on board. No matter what, we would come in every day at a meeting, and we were ready to go. They could care less about the record. They cared about that coach, and they fought for him. And so that's the power of showing your heart. And that's what he's told me. Yeah, they want consistency. They want to be disciplined. But they want to know that somebody cares, because they don't get that at home.
Charles, this is on Charles' comment, and I'd like to follow up on this. He makes a great point for all coaches and guys that are administrators or whatever it may be. In life, when you're in a leadership position, there's the concept of you teach people what to do, you teach them how to do it. But he's absolutely correct. They have no knowledge until you tell them why. And if you can't answer why, then you're denying them knowledge. And I think sometimes in coaching, we're in fear of that. I dealt with that at a young age. I grew up in the 70s, okay? And when you asked a white coach a question, you were questioning authority. You were flat questioning authority. When you asked the coach why, that's why I left Cal Berkeley. That's why I left the school. I flat left. Walked off campus, I can remember in the spring. Walked off football practice, got in my car, packed it up, drove to San Diego State. Because I asked the coach, why were we doing certain drills? He couldn't give me an answer. When he looked at me and said, you questioning my authority? I said, no, I just want to know why. I wanted knowledge. And so you have to ask why. And from that period on, this happened in 1974, my junior year at University of California, Berkeley. I'm up for All-American, my senior year. I left. I flat left. With no scholarship, nothing. I said, this guy can't tell me why. Went to San Diego State, was blackballed. Was blackballed. Did not get drafted. In 1977, I was a free agent in the National Football League. 125 guys in training camp. They were going to keep 7 defensive backs. I started as a rookie, never missed a game in 10 years, never missed a practice. From that day forward, I told myself, if I ever become a coach, I'm going to always tell players why. When I became a head coach, the first thing I told my assistant coaches, if you can't tell them why, you can't coach them. You better be able to tell them why.
Herm made a great point there for as far as youth coaches are concerned. Well, there is a fear. There's a fear, and I think that's the education, USA Football and Heads Up program, which I've been a huge fan of since its inception, is trying to get the coaches to get past that fear and teach, coach and teach, and explain why, and help these guys to grow. And as opposed to, you know, the days are gone where the coach walks in and because I have the hat and the whistle, I say do and you do. That's long gone. That's long gone.
It's long been a challenge at Stanford, hasn't it?
There's no question about it. I get asked why. I mean, how many times has it been today? You know, and we should want the guys to thirst that knowledge. We want them to understand why. And guess what? They'll go harder. They'll play faster, and you'll build that trust because the coach can communicate with me. He can help me, and guess what? He's on my side.
But I don't think that hasn't translated down to the youth level. I mean, I applaud these gentlemen over here that are running youth football leagues and the high school coaches. At the youth football level in particular, I think, you know, the disciplinarian, the toughness, more and more they're interested in better fundamentals and techniques and standards and all those things. But I take responsibility for it, and again, hopefully PCA and we work together to do a better job of getting this out. But how do you educate them on, talk to them and tell them why, and tell them you care about them, and tell them you love them, and make that connection? Because if you do all those things together, you're going to change the life of that child earlier, and then by the time he reaches high school, he's going to be better off. And then again,
absolutely,
the 1% that's going to rise up is going to actually make the NFL.
But for me, it's like you're not the 1%. Yeah. So we're not even going to have that conversation.
Fair enough. So let's worry about the 99%.
So the conversation for me, if I'm a youth football player, is look, I want to make you the best janitor, head coach, lawyer, doctor, whatever teacher, another coach you can be. That's my job. I'm not making you the best next Herman Edwards. I'm not trying to make you Charles Way. I'm trying to make you the best professional you can be. My concern is personal and professional growth. I did not once mention professional athlete. Personal and professional growth. Explain to them, because I learned it in my new job. It's a different world out there. Go from literally mom and pop, hanging out with mom and pop at the New York Giants for 15, almost 20 years, to going to corporate America, Big Brother, and everybody like, what? I'm like, I didn't know I want to go back home. Because you get knocked down, and if you're not ready, and this is what football has taught me, I wasn't the best. But if I knew that if I put the work in, and I was committed, then I knew I could be successful. And that's what sports in general teaches you. That you won't win all the time. And then you will have some failures. But there is, if you put the time in, and if you work hard, you will get better. And I always tell my daughter, you're a good athlete. It's okay to be average. Right? But if you work, you can be good. And if you work even harder, you may be great. But you know what? As long as you're working to be great, you'll never be good. You'll always be better than good. And so look, we get caught up between the greatness. We get caught up Michael Jordan. We getting caught up in Eli Manning's and the Peyton Manning's. Look, we can't be them. I couldn't be them. I was an average player, average good player that played 5 years and could have played a lot longer. I didn't. And so guess what? I got to deal with it. But this game has given me a lot. And guess what? And if it wasn't for this game of football, I guarantee you I would not be sitting in front of you today sharing my story.
But Charles, one thing I have to stress, and it was brought up earlier, is the youth sports system today is not affording an opportunity for a young person, even if they had the right mindset, had the right coaching, had the right parent influence, all those things, which unfortunately isn't often the case, to actually develop. So it's astonishing to me, this whole sport specialization thing. Football is the only sport left that really isn't based on elite, travel, tournament, team sports. And frankly, the only reason it isn't because you can't do it. You don't play multiple games a weekend. If we could, we'd be right there with them. Sadly, that's the reality. Every other sport does this. And so today, what happened to when I was growing up, and I played basketball in college, but I was an okay basketball player. And I was an okay soccer player. I played all these sports. But when I wasn't an elite player at 10 and 12, I went back to the rec program. Right? Now there's nothing. If you don't make the elite program at 10 and 12, which what in the world's an elite athlete at 10 and 12 is a joke, where do you go from there? There's no place to fall back. And you look at the SFIA data that says inactivity is an epidemic, not a they call it a pandemic, not an epidemic, not a crisis, a pandemic. Because out of 105 activities that they asked ages 8 all the way to 75, 20% of our youth signed nothing. They didn't check one box. Their definition of activity was going home with the phone and the computer, and they call that activity. So there's all kinds of issues. Kids aren't turning to sport because they're not elite at 10, and they're not elite at 12. We're doing a massive disservice. And then all the data out there shows, from the medical community, that overuse injuries and all this, somehow, this is where I go back to the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball. Like, you as professional sports organizations need to come together and help us send the message. Because if you talk to any coach, I guarantee you a coach would say, I'm looking for a great athlete. My son's going to go play lacrosse at Notre Dame, and the first thing the coach said to him, I love you play basketball. I love the fact you're playing football. I love the fact you're a good young man. But they first and foremost was about, what else do you do? I know you're a good lacrosse player. I get that. But I love that you're doing all these other things. And the great stat, for what it's worth for parents, is the last NFL draft, out of the first 32 picks, 27 of them were multi-sport athletes. 17 of them were 3-sport athletes in high school. It's like, we have to get the message out there that multiple sports is the future. That's the way to go. And again, the 99%, you're better to play multiple sports. You're better experience, you meet more people. Better life lessons.
But it starts with us.
Yes.
The coaches in the room who demand, and this is what I hear, who demand that their youth football player only play football. Yeah. Or their youth basketball player only play basketball. Let me just tell you something. There are statistics out there that show if you play multiple sports, you develop a lot faster. And so it's up to us. We have to change our mindset. It's up to us in the room to get away from, no one else can have my player. No one else. I don't want you playing soccer. I don't want you playing baseball. You're only playing basketball. And that's what happens. And so until we change our mindset, don't expect our kids to change their mindset. Because we are very impressionable, and we can force children to do other things. Because when a coach told me, you better wrestle this season, after football season, you go to wrestling. And after wrestling, you go run track. I did it. I did it because a coach told me to do it. Now, if you don't, so that's the influence we all have in our players' lives. So until we start taking ownership of the fact that we have some influence in the people we deal with lives, then expect the outcome that Scott's talked about.
But you guys are the influencers, and I'd love to say I am, and you know, I won't speak for PCA, you definitely have influence, but man, if people like you are the ones that say that, like, I want athletes, I want kids to play multiple sports, it's important you parents get your kids to play multiple sports, that will resonate.
It's been a struggle for us, honestly, because we end up battling the high school coach.
Exactly.
Who only wants his guy to play football. I said, I'd love to see him run track.
Yep.
I'd love to see him play basketball. I'd love to see him compete year round and not lift weights for 8 months and then play football again.
That's the word, compete, right?
Yeah, let's make them more diverse athletes. Let's get them around.